Captain Jake Morrison sat in the back row of Xenobiology 401, watching his classmates file into the lecture hall like they were attending their own funeral, which, honestly, considering today's topic was apex predator studies, maybe they were. The Galactic Academy had very generously accepted Earth's first exchange student, though Jake suspected it was more for the novelty than any actual belief in human intelligence. After all, humans came from what the rest of the galaxy politely called a Class 12 death world, and what they whispered about in the dormitories as that nightmare planet where literally everything wants to kill you. Jake found this reputation hilarious. Professor Quirrell, a 7-foot-tall mantis-like creature with an ego twice his height, clicked his mandibles importantly as he adjusted his holographic display. The professor had made it very clear on day one that he considered Jake's presence in his advanced course to be either a clerical error or cosmic joke. Today, class, we delve into the most terrifying aspect of predator psychology, Professor Quill announced, his compound eyes gleaming with what Jake could only describe as academic bloodlust. We will experience firsthand the bone-chilling vocalizations that have evolved to paralyze prey across 17 different star systems. Vex, the crystalline being who sat 2 seats over, immediately began vibrating with anxiety. Her translucent body flickered between colors like a nervous mood ring. Professor, shouldn't we have psychological counseling on standby for this session? Excellent point, Vex. Krill nodded approvingly. I've arranged for Dr. Nimbus to monitor our stress levels remotely. In the front row, Terra fluffed her gills nervously. The aquatic Seldonian had filled her portable water tank to the brim today, probably planning to hide underwater if things got too intense. Professor, my species has generational trauma from the deep maw predators. Should I excuse myself? Nonsense, Terra. Facing our fears is the only way to understand them scientifically. Jake couldn't help himself. You guys do realize these are just recordings, right? Like they can't actually hurt you through the speakers. The entire class turned to stare at him. Professor Krill's antennae twitched with what Jake was learning to recognize as barely contained irritation. Ah yes, our human exchange student, Krill said, somehow managing to make human sound like a particularly unsavory medical condition. I suppose on your charming little death world you are accustomed to living in constant terror. This may seem mundane to you. Jake shrugged. I mean, I grew up in Colorado, so I've heard my share of weird animal noises. Can't be that different. Vex's crystal form went completely clear with shock. You lived among the predators? Voluntarily? Well, yeah. That's generally where the good hiking trails are. Professor Quill clicked his mandibles dismissively. I think you'll find, Morrison, that galactic apex predators operate on an entirely different level than whatever quaint creatures inhabit your little backwater planet. Jake settled back in his chair with a grin that would have made any Earth predator proud. We'll see about that, Professor. Professor Quill's compound eyes practically gleamed with anticipation as he dimmed the lights. Very well then, let us begin our journey into the darkest corners of predatory evolution. The holographic display flickered to life, showing a swirling galaxy map with pulsing red dots marking various danger zones. Jake thought it looked like a teenager's attempt at making a scary video game interface. Our first specimen, Quill announced dramatically, comes from the shadow forests of Kepler 442b. The umbral stalker has terrorized 3 separate colonization attempts. Listen, if you dare, to the sound that has driven entire settlements mad with fear. A low, warbling howl filled the lecture hall. It started quiet, then rose to a crescendo that sounded like someone slowly deflating a bagpipe while gargling mouthwash. The effect on Jake's classmates was immediate and ridiculous. Vex began vibrating so violently that she looked like a tuning fork having an existential crisis. Her crystalline body cycled through every color in the visible spectrum, before settling on a sickly yellow-green. Sarah immediately dove into her water tank with a splash that soaked the first 3 rows. Only her terrified eyes remained above the waterline, like some kind of academic submarine periscope. Fascinating, Professor Quill murmured, clearly enjoying himself. Notice how the harmonic frequencies target the prey species' auditory processing centers, inducing paralysis through pure terror. Jake raised his hand. Professor, that just sounds like a moose with seasonal allergies. The warbling cut off abruptly. I beg your pardon? Yeah, we've got elk back home that make similar noises during mating season. Usually means they're congested. You should hear them after a good rain. Corillum antennae twitched. Morrison, this is the cry of a creature that has consumed over 3,000 sentient beings. Huh, Jake nodded thoughtfully. So like a really successful moose. From her tank, Terra made a horrified gurgling sound that might have been laughter or hyperventilation. Jake couldn't tell which. Let us proceed, Quill said stiffly, to something more substantial. The next sound was a series of clicking and chittering that rose in pitch until it became an almost ultrasonic scream. This time, Vex actually did crack, a hairline fracture running down her left arm as she whimpered in harmonics that hurt Jake's ears. The Void Ripper of the Andromeda Spiral, Krill intoned reverently. Its call can shatter reinforced hull plating from 3 kilometers away. Jake cocked his head thoughtfully. Oh, that's just like the cicadas we get in summer, except our cicadas don't actually rip anything. They just make it impossible to sleep and dive-bomb your head when you're trying to barbecue. Cicadas, Vex whispered, her crack spreading slightly. Yeah, harmless little bugs. Well, mostly harmless. They're pretty stupid and have terrible aim, but they're loud as hell for something the size of your thumb. Professor Quill was beginning to look like someone had told him that his life's work was actually a community college hobby course. Morrison, these are apex predators, evolutionary masterpieces of terror and death. I mean, sure, Jake said agreeably, but have you ever been to a family barbecue in July? Because that's basically the same thing, except with more potato salad and questionable uncles. The professor's mandibles were clicking rapidly now, a sound Jake was pretty sure meant barely controlled academic rage. Perfect. They were just getting to the good part. Professor Creel straightened to his full imposing height, compound eyes narrowing with the kind of academic vindictiveness that had probably destroyed careers across 17 star systems. Very well, Morrison. Perhaps my previous examples were too pedestrian for someone of your clearly extensive Deathworld experience. Jake could practically taste the sarcasm dripping from that sentence. This was about to get fun. Class, Quill announced with the solemnity of someone delivering a death sentence. I present to you the apex of evolutionary terror, the sound that has caused 3 separate space stations to evacuate their entire populations, the cry that drove the Centauri Mining Consortium to abandon a 1 trillion-credit asteroid field rather than face what made it. The professor's manipulator arms danced over his controls with theatrical precision. Behold, the death scream of the Shadowcat of Proxima Centauri. No living being has heard this sound and remained psychologically intact. Jake perked up with genuine interest. This sounded promising. The speakers crackled to life, and suddenly the lecture hall was filled with the most bone-chilling, soul-destroying sound in the known galaxy. It started as a low moan that seemed to come from the deepest pits of hell itself, then rose to a shrieking wail that sounded like the dying screams of 1,000 tortured souls being dragged into eternal damnation. Vex didn't just crack this time. She completely shattered, her crystalline form exploding into 1,000 glittering pieces that scattered across the floor while she wailed in 17 different harmonic frequencies. Tara's water tank began bubbling violently as she hyperventilated underwater, creating what looked like the world's most terrified jacuzzi. Even some of the other students Jake hadn't bothered learning the names of were showing physical symptoms. One had turned an alarming shade of purple and appeared to be leaking some kind of fluorescent fluid from his ear holes. The sound reached its crescendo, a shriek so terrible that the building's emergency systems activated, bathing everything in pulsing red light as if the very architecture was having a panic attack. And Jake Morrison, human exchange student from the little death world called Earth, burst out laughing. Not just a chuckle, not a polite academic acknowledgement. He threw back his head and laughed so hard that tears started streaming down his face. Oh, come on, Jake wheezed between fits of laughter. That's just a cougar having a bad day. The terrible sound cut off abruptly. The emergency lights stopped flashing. The only sound in the lecture hall was Jake's continued chuckling and the gentle tinkle of Vex's crystalline pieces settling on the floor. Professor Krill stood frozen, his compound eyes locked on Jake with the kind of stare usually reserved for discovering that everything you believed about physics was wrong. A cougar. Quill's voice was barely above a whisper. Yeah, mountain lion, puma, same animal, different names. Jake wiped his eyes, still grinning. They make that exact sound when they're pissed off or looking for a mate. I grew up camping in the Colorado Rockies, Professor. That's basically the soundtrack to every family vacation I ever took. But the psychological trauma reports... Oh, sure, it's startling the first time you hear it, Jake said cheerfully. Scared the hell out of me when I was 8 and had to pee outside our tent at 2 in the morning. But you get used to it. My dad always said if you can hear them, they're probably not hunting you. It's when they go quiet that you should worry. Tara's head emerged from her tank like a traumatized periscope. You grew up with these creatures. Well, not with them exactly, more like we shared the same zip code, They mostly kept to themselves unless someone left food out or got between a mom and her cubs. Then things got interesting. Professor Quill's antennae were now trembling so violently they looked like they might fall off. Morrison, are you telling me that your species coexists with apex predators? Jake shrugged. I mean, we don't really coexist so much as we both pretend the other doesn't exist until someone does something stupid. Works out pretty well most of the time. He paused, considering. Although now that I think about it, Earth probably has way scarier stuff than mountain lions. You guys want to hear about Australia? The collective intake of breath from his remaining conscious classmates suggested that no, they absolutely did not want to hear about Australia. But Jake had a feeling he was going to tell them anyway. You know what? Jake said, settling back in his chair with the satisfied air of someone about to ruin everyone's day. Let me put this in perspective for you guys. That mountain lion you just heard? In the grand scheme of Earth predators, that's basically a house cat with anxiety issues. Professor Quill's compound eyes were twitching. Morrison, please tell me you're exaggerating. Oh, not even close, Professor. See, mountain lions are what we call ambush predators. They're actually pretty polite about the whole killing thing. They sneak up, make it quick, everybody goes home happy. Well, except for the deer, but you can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. From her reassembling crystal pile on the floor, Vex managed to wheeze, polite predators? Right. Now let me tell you about grizzly bears. Jake's grin widened as several students visibly recoiled. These guys are basically 800 pounds of muscle, claws, and bad attitude wrapped in a fur coat that laughs at bullets. They can run 40 miles per hour, which is faster than any human, climb trees better than most humans, and swim better than most humans. Basically, they're better at being human than we are. Tara had gone completely underwater again, but Jake could see bubbles of terror rising from her tank. But here's the fun part, Jake continued cheerfully. Humans camp in grizzly territory for recreation. We literally pay money to sleep in tents made of fabric, while surrounded by creatures that could tear apart a small car. And we call it fun family bonding time. One of the slug-like students Jake hadn't bothered learning the name of made a noise like a deflating balloon and slithered toward the exit. Professor Krill didn't stop him. Of course, bears are nothing compared to great white sharks, Jake said, warming to his theme. These guys are 20 feet of pure killing machine that have been perfecting their murder techniques for 400 million years. They can smell a drop of blood from 3 miles away, bite through a steel cage, and launch themselves 15 feet out of the water, like a 2-ton missile with teeth. Surely, Professor Quell said weakly, your species avoids oceanic areas inhabited by such creatures. Jake laughed so hard he snorted. Avoids them? Professor, we invented a whole sport called surfing that basically involves floating on top of their hunting grounds on a piece of fiberglass while wearing a wetsuit that makes us look exactly like their favorite food. Some humans do this professionally. We have competitions. The remaining students were staring at him with the kind of horrified fascination usually reserved for watching a particularly gruesome traffic accident. But wait, there's more, Jake said, channeling his inner infomercial announcer. We haven't even talked about Australia yet. Australia is what happens when an entire continent decides to specialize in murder. They've got spiders the size of dinner plates that can kill you in 15 minutes. Snakes that are so venomous they could kill 100 adults with one bite, and they're aggressive enough to chase you just for fun. Jellyfish that are basically transparent death floating in the water, and crocodiles that are so mean they make alligators look like therapy dogs. Bex had managed to reassemble about 60% of herself, and was now vibrating like a broken tuning fork. How? How do humans survive on this planet? Oh, that's the best part, Jake said, his eyes absolutely sparkling with malicious glee. We don't just survive, we thrive. Australians will literally grab venomous snakes with their bare hands and relocate them like they're helping an elderly neighbor with groceries. They have barbecues in crocodile territory. They invented a sport called rugby that's basically controlled violence for entertainment, and they play it in fields where everything in the grass wants to bite them. Professor Krilligon completely silent, his antennae drooping like wilted flowers. And here's the thing that's really going to bake your academic brain, Professor, Jake said, leaning forward conspiratorially. All of this, every single thing I just described, is what humans consider normal Tuesday afternoon entertainment. We don't just coexist with apex predators, we actively seek them out. We pay money to swim with sharks, we hike through bear country, we go camping in places where mountain lions scream all night, we call it vacation. He paused for effect, watching as his words sank into the collective consciousness of beings who considered a mildly aggressive houseplant to be a significant threat. Humans don't fear predators, Professor. We are the predators. We just pretend to be civilized because it makes dinner conversation less awkward. The lecture hall had gone so quiet that Jake could hear the gentle bubbling of Tara's panicked breathing apparatus and the soft, crystalline chiming of Vex, trying to pull herself back together. Professor Krill finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. Morrison, what does your species actually consider frightening? Jake thought about it for a moment, tapping his finger against his chin with theatrical consideration. Well, he said slowly, tax audits are pretty terrifying, and running out of coffee. Oh, and trying to assemble IKEA furniture without the instruction manual. That'll break most humans. The silence that followed was so profound that Jake was pretty sure he could hear several worldviews cracking. Professor Krill stood there for a long moment, looking like someone had just explained to him that mathematics was actually an elaborate practical joke. His compound eyes were unfocused, his antennae hung limp, and Jake was pretty sure he could see a small nervous tic developing in the professor's left mandible. Morrison, Krill said finally, his voice carrying the hollow tone of a being whose entire academic career had just been retroactively invalidated. I find your claims difficult to accept. Jake shrugged good-naturedly. Hey, I get it. It's a lot to process. Tell you what, Professor, how about I show you some actual Earth predator behavior, for science? Before anyone could object, or flee, which several students looked like they were seriously considering, Jake pulled out his tablet. The device looked hilariously primitive compared to the holographic displays and quantum processors scattered around the lecture hall, but it got the job done. Now, I should probably warn you, Jake said as he scrolled through his files. These are just nature documentaries. You know, the kind of thing we show to children on Sunday mornings while they eat sugary cereal, educational television. Vex, who had managed to reassemble roughly 80% of herself into something vaguely humanoid-shaped, made a crystalline whimpering sound. Children watch predator footage while consuming nutrition? Oh yeah, it's basically weekend tradition. Kids love this stuff. Jake tapped his screen, and suddenly the wall display lit up with what looked like a peaceful African savanna. Okay, let's start with something easy. This is a honey badger. The footage showed what appeared to be a small, unassuming black and white creature about the size of a medium dog, casually strolling across the grassland. Ah, Tara said from her tank. Her first voluntary comment since the mountain lion incident. It looks rather cute. Jake's grin turned absolutely feral. Oh, just wait. The next 60 seconds of footage were like watching a small, furry apocalypse. The honey badger proceeded to fight off 2 jackals, terrorize a leopard, tear apart a beehive while being stung hundreds of times, and then casually eat a venomous snake like it was a particularly chewy piece of spaghetti. Sweet merciful void, whispered someone from the back of the class. That, Jake said with obvious pride, is what happens when evolution gives up on balance and just decides to create pure, concentrated aggression in a 20-pound package. Honey badgers don't give a damn about anything. Lions avoid them. Hyenas cross the street when they see them coming. They've been known to castrate buffalo just for looking at them wrong. Professor Quill's left antenna had begun twitching uncontrollably. And humans coexist with these creatures? Well, mostly we just admire them from a safe distance and make internet memes about them. But yeah, they live on the same planet we do. Jake swiped to the next video. Now let's talk about hippos. The screen filled with what looked like a massive, blubbery river cow lounging peacefully in muddy water. Several students visibly relaxed. This looks less threatening, Vex said hopefully, her crystal form finally stabilizing into something resembling her original shape. Oh, you sweet, naive, crystalline being, Jake said with mock sympathy. Hippos kill more humans in Africa than any other large animal. They're 3 tons of muscle and rage with jaws that can snap a crocodile in half. They can run 30 miles per hour on land, which is faster than most humans, and they're territorial, aggressive, and have absolutely zero chill about anything ever. The footage shifted to show a hippo launching itself out of the water like a biological torpedo, jaws opening to reveal teeth the size of railroad spikes. Then it showed another hippo casually biting a crocodile completely in half. But does that mean to the people? Tara whimpered from her tank. That's the beauty of it, Jake said cheerfully. They look like overweight pool floaties until someone gets too close, and then they turn into aquatic murder machines. It's like nature's ultimate prank. He swiped again, and the screen filled with what looked like a normal residential backyard. But honestly, if you really want to see some nightmare fuel, let's check out Australia's greatest hits compilation. What followed was essentially 20 minutes of pure, concentrated terror disguised as a wildlife documentary. Jake provided cheerful, educational commentary, while the screen showed huntsman spiders the size of dinner plates casually strolling across bathroom walls, funnel web spiders that could bite through fingernails, redback spiders hiding in toilet seats, and brown snakes that were basically slithering death machines with anger management issues. "Oh, and this is a drop bear," Jake said, as the footage showed what appeared to be a normal koala. "Just kidding, those aren't real. Australians made them up to mess with tourists. Although considering everything else that lives there, it's amazing anyone believed drop bears were necessary." By this point, Vex had given up maintaining her humanoid form and had collapsed into a shimmering puddle of terrified crystal. Tara had built what appeared to be a fort out of aquatic plants inside her tank and was peering out through a small gap, like a traumatized submarine periscope. "Here's a saltwater crocodile," Jake continued, apparently oblivious to the psychological carnage he was wreaking. "They can grow up to 23 feet long, weigh over a ton, have the strongest bite force of any animal on Earth, and they're smart enough to remember human patterns and plan ambushes. Australians call them salties, and some people keep them as pets." Professor Quill made a noise like air escaping from a punctured tire. "Pets?" "Well, not house pets exactly, more like really dangerous lawn ornaments that occasionally eat the mailman." Jake paused the video on a close-up of a crocodile's eye, which seemed to stare directly into the soul of every being in the lecture hall. "But here's my personal favorite." He swiped to a new video, and suddenly the screen was filled with crystal-clear ocean water. It looked peaceful, inviting even. "This is the box jellyfish," Jake announced with the enthusiasm of someone showing off baby pictures. "Also known as the sea wasp, which should tell you everything you need to know about Australian naming conventions. This little beauty is considered one of the most venomous creatures on Earth. Its tentacles can stretch 10 feet, it's nearly transparent so you can't see it coming, and its sting can kill an adult human in under 5 minutes. The footage showed the jellyfish drifting gracefully through the water, its tentacles trailing behind like deadly party streamers. The pain is supposed to be so intense that victims have been known to go into shock and drown before the venom even kills them. And the best part? They're found along popular swimming beaches. Australians have developed special vinegar stations along the coast just in case someone gets stung." "Vinegar?" Vex managed to gurgle from her puddle form. "Yeah, apparently it helps with the venom. Or maybe it's just for the fish and chips. Australians are weird about condiments." Jake closed his tablet with a satisfied snap. "And that, Professor Krill, is what humans consider a normal weekend nature documentary. We show this stuff to kindergarteners." Professor Krill hadn't spoken in the last 10 minutes. He was just standing there, staring at the now blank wall display with the 1,000-yard stare of someone who had seen too much and understood too little. Finally, Tara emerged slightly from her plant fort. "Jake," she said in a voice barely above a whisper, "how has your species not gone extinct?" Jake considered this seriously. "Honestly, I think we're too stubborn to die. Plus, we invented beer, which helps with the stress." The lecture hall had taken on the atmosphere of a trauma counseling session. Vex was still a quivering puddle of crystalline anxiety on the floor, making soft chiming sounds that Jake was pretty sure translated to, "Why did I choose xenobiology as a major?" Tara had constructed what appeared to be an elaborate bunker system inside her water tank, complete with what looked like tiny periscopes made from aquatic vegetation. The few remaining students who hadn't fled during the Australian wildlife segment were huddled together in the back corner, probably forming some kind of support group for beings who had learned too much about humanity in too short a time. Professor Krill stood motionless at his podium, staring at his holographic display controls as if they had personally betrayed him. His compound eyes had gone completely unfocused, and Jake was starting to worry that he might have broken the poor professor's brain entirely. The silence stretched on until it became genuinely uncomfortable. Jake was just about to suggest maybe calling this a day, when Professor Quill finally spoke, his voice carrying the hollow, defeated tone of someone whose entire worldview had been fed through a wood chipper. "Morrison," Krill said without looking up from his controls, "I have spent the last 47 years of my life studying predator behavior across 17 different star systems. I have documented the hunting patterns of creatures that have driven entire civilizations to extinction. I have cataloged the most terrifying sounds in the known galaxy." He finally looked up, and Jake was startled to see something that looked almost like existential despair in those compound eyes. "In all my years of research, across all the death worlds and nightmare planets I have studied, I have never encountered anything as casually, horrifyingly dangerous as what you have just described as your species' normal living conditions." Jake shifted uncomfortably. He hadn't really meant to destroy the guy's entire career. Look, Professor, I'm sure there are plenty of scary things out there that… No, Quill interrupted, holding up one of his manipulator arms. Just no. I need to ask you something and I want you to answer honestly. Sure, shoot. What does your species actually consider genuinely frightening? What makes humans experience true terror? Jake leaned back in his chair and thought about it seriously. This was clearly important to the professor, and after accidentally demolishing the poor guy's life's work, he figured he owed him a straight answer. Well, Jake said slowly, tax audits are legitimately terrifying. There's something about a government official going through your financial records with a microscope that makes grown humans weep. We'll face down grizzly bears all day, but stick us in a room with an IRS agent and we turn into quivering messes. Professor Quill blinked several times. Financial, auditing. Oh yeah. Paperwork-based terror is our kryptonite. Also, running out of coffee, that's an actual emergency situation for most humans. We become non-functional without caffeine. Some humans literally cannot process information before their first cup of coffee in the morning. Caffeine dependency, Quill repeated, weakly. And customer service phone calls. You know, when you have to navigate 17 different menu options just to talk to another human, and then they put you on hold for 45 minutes while playing music that sounds like it was composed by someone who actively hates the concept of melody. From her puddle on the floor, Vex made a confused chiming sound. I do not understand. These things do not threaten your physical survival. Jake grinned. That's the beautiful irony of human psychology, Vex. We'll voluntarily jump out of perfectly functional aircraft for entertainment, but ask us to call our health insurance company to dispute a claim, and we'll put it off for months because it's too stressful. Oh, Jake continued, warming to the topic, and assembling furniture from IKEA without the instruction manual. That's basically psychological warfare disguised as home improvement. The Swedish have weaponized flat-pack furniture, and somehow we keep buying it. Tara's voice emerged from her aquatic fortress, muffled but audible. I am starting to think your species might be insane. Yeah, that's a pretty fair assessment, Jake agreed cheerfully. We're basically cosmic-level crazy, but we're functional crazy. It's like being the galaxy's most successful psychopaths. Except we mostly channel our insanity into extreme sports and really elaborate practical jokes. Professor Krill had gone quiet again, but this time it was the thoughtful quiet of someone processing information rather than the catatonic quiet of someone whose brain had blue-screened. Morrison, he said finally, I think we need to have a serious discussion about your academic placement. Jake raised an eyebrow. Am I getting kicked out of xenobiology class for traumatizing my classmates? Quite the opposite. Quill's antennae were starting to perk up slightly, like wilted flowers getting their first drink of water. I'm recommending you for immediate transfer to the Advanced Survival Instructor Program. Wait, what? Morrison, in the space of one class period, you have demonstrated more practical knowledge about apex predator behavior than most graduate students acquire in 4 years. You've also proven that humans possess an intuitive understanding of danger assessment that puts our most sophisticated threat analysis systems to shame. Professor Quill actually straightened up, and Jake could see something like academic excitement returning to his compound eyes. The Galactic Academy has been trying to develop effective Death World survival training programs for decades. We keep losing colonists to planets we classified as mildly hazardous because our threat assessment models are apparently calibrated for species that consider strong wind to be a natural disaster. So you want me to teach other people how to not die on dangerous planets? Morrison, I want you to teach them how to think like humans. How to look at a creature that could tear them in half and calmly assess whether it's actually dangerous or just having a bad hair day. How to hear sounds that would paralyze most civilized beings and recognize them as the equivalent of background elevator music. Jake considered this. That actually sounds kind of cool. Do I get to show more nature documentaries? You can show whatever you think will properly prepare them for the reality of Death World exploration, within reason. Define within reason. Professor Quill's antennae drooped slightly. Please don't show them anything from Australia until at least week 3. I need time to arrange for additional medical support. Jake laughed. Deal, but I'm definitely covering honey badgers on day 1. If you're going to teach people about real predators, you might as well start with the gold standard of not giving a damn. As if on cue, the lecture hall's intercom crackled to life. Attention students and faculty, this is Dean Throzak. We've received several reports of psychological distress emanating from Lecture Hall 7. Please confirm your status. Professor Krill looked around at his traumatized classroom. Vex still pooled on the floor, Tara maintaining her aquatic bunker, the handful of remaining students huddled together like survivors of some cosmic horror, and activated his comm unit. Dean Throzak, this is Professor Quill. We're fine. We've just discovered that our human exchange student is qualified to teach Death World Survival 101, possibly better qualified than our entire current faculty combined. There was a long pause from the intercom. Professor, did you just say that a first-year exchange student is better at survival instruction than our professional staff? Dean, I'm saying that what we call advanced survival techniques are what humans call a normal Tuesday. I strongly recommend we restructure our entire program around Morrison's practical experience. Another pause. Very well. Morrison, report to my office after class. We need to discuss your new teaching responsibilities. Jake stood up and gathered his primitive tablet, grinning at the scene of academic devastation around him. Well, Professor, this has been educational. Same time next week? Professor Quill actually chuckled, a sound like wind chimes made of chitin. Morrison, I don't think there will be a next week, at least not for this class. But I have a feeling you're going to be very busy teaching others how to survive in a universe that's apparently much more dangerous than we ever realized. As Jake headed for the door, he paused and looked back at his shell-shocked classmates. Hey, before I go, anyone want to hear about Florida? The collective no from every conscious being in the room was so loud it probably registered on seismic equipment 3 floors down. Jake laughed all the way to the dean's office.